Hello and welcome to Fascism on Film. I'm James Kent. Along with me is Teal Minton. You can find us on fascismonfilm.com. This is season 2 of the program. And last week we talked about This Land Is Mine. We're going to stay in the land of France, which was occupied by the Germans. The Germans, after occupying Poland, they went after France. June of 1940. The French were ill-prepared for a invasion. They were basically about as prepared as they were as the last war. They hadn't been keeping up on their armaments. I think they were still fighting the military with horses.
Yes, they were.
You know, they had a fortified area called the Maginot Line. It was sort of like these like bunkers, but they didn't last long enough around their coastline, and so they were easily taken over by the military might of the Germans. And they quickly realized that, well, maybe the way to get along here is to just work together as a team. And so the government
collaborate a little bit. Well, and I think, this is something we talked about in the last film too, is this choice of resisting and collaboration. And here it was real collaboration. It wasn't just cooperating. They actually got involved in this. And sort of one of the big things in this film is this roundup of Jews that happens in 1942. And that was done by the French authorities and the French police. It was not run by the Nazis. And so Veldiv roundup, that was in July 42, so basically 2 years after the Nazis took over France. But the Vichy government really did take on those aspects of the Nazi government. And so it was, there were a lot of Germans there, but a lot of the occupation was the French police enforcing these things.
If you're looking to go further and you want a good documentary, I think one of the best really searing takedowns of the Vichy government is The Sorrow and the Pity.
Mr. Klein, the film we're talking about, Monsieur Klein or Mr. Klein, directed by
Monsieur Klein.
Monsieur Klein, directed by Joseph Losey from 1976, was in this period. I forget what year Sorrow and the Pity was, but it was within about 5 or 6 years of that. And this was a time that France was actually starting to finally reckon with their Vichy past, which had been buried to some extent. And they kind of went on ignoring that it had happened. And not completely buried, but it was a national, there was national guilt about it. And so it was not talked about as much. And then Sorrow and the Pity and even Monsieur Klein and these other people started really looking back and saying, oh, wait, we did more than the Nazis were asking for. We really, we sent them more Jews than they asked them for, kind of thing.
As part of this, the armistice that happened, so that when they surrendered, they created an occupation zone.
Yes.
And so there was a free zone technically in France, that for a while, the big goal was to try to get over to the free zone.
Yes. And because northern France was mostly run by the Nazis and southern France was more run by the Vichy.
Yes.
So anyhow, this
Well, I mean, I think people to understand the subtext. I don't see a problem with us bringing in some.
No. I'm not at all. I think you particularly in a film like this, you really do need some of the historical context because there's not a lot of information given directly about that. You pick it up as you go, sort of in how the scenes work and how the police are working and how the bureaucracy works. And so it doesn't lay out a lot of it's not, the movie is not trying to tell you history.
No, it drops you into history.
It drops you into it and it tries to give you the feeling and the mood and the sensation of living in this type of environment under fascism.
Yeah. So one of the cool things, though, is Joseph Losey makes kind of 2 films and combines them. And one film almost feels very documentary-like. And that's the part that's where it dropped you into real history. But within the context of this real history, this real moment in time, there is a movie going on, a mystery, a very surreal mystery.
Yeah, it gets weirder and weirder. It reminded me of Winter Kills, or any other kind of conspiracy theory thriller where the character is following clues down a rabbit hole. In this case, this is very important. To just the premise of the movie is that this guy, Robert Klein, is a sort of playboy art dealer in Paris, and is taking huge advantage of Jews that need to leave the country suddenly and sell their possessions and sell their artwork. And so he sort of rips these people off and collecting all these paintings. And then one day in his mail, he gets a Jewish newspaper addressed to him. And he's very confused by this and immediately knows the danger involved in it. He immediately understands, I don't want to be mistaken for somebody who's Jewish, and starts pursuing the mistaken address. He goes to the newspaper office, he goes to the police, and that sort of initial clue leads him down this surreal sort of search for the doppelganger journey that takes him through it. And sometimes it's almost like the fascism is going on around him and he's not totally aware of it. He becomes so focused on this that somehow finding this other Robert Klein will relieve this whole thing and solve everything.
At certain points, I feel like we're getting ahead of some of these other interesting aspects of the movie, but in terms of the story, at some point, he has people that are willing to help him. There's actual plot mechanisms to get him out of this supposed jam, but he becomes a man obsessed with unraveling this mystery of who this other Klein guy is.
Despite knowing how the film ends and knowing how it all turns out, which is sort of ambiguous, I should add, but even knowing that, there were times watching the film, and when I was watching it again, where I started to think, maybe he's the other Mr. Klein. Maybe it's a part of himself. Maybe it's like Fight Club, even though I know that's not true. But the film opens itself up enough for you to start having ideas like that.
And I don't even know if that's necessarily not true. I mean, there's a lot that this film, again, like the best films, leave a little bit to the imagination. But certainly that it becomes this existential Kafka-esque mystery, as if there really is another Mr. Klein. And really what Joseph Losey's doing is making this point of, what is a Jew? If you're labeled a Jew, down it, and he sets the tone right at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah,
there's an interesting examination, which it turns out the examination is being done by a veterinarian.
Yeah,
because it's mentioned later, and this veterinarian, for money, will perform an exam that basically says you do or don't have Jewish features. Like if you don't, it sort of becomes a document. And it's almost similar to what in Italy they did, where if you were labeled homosexual, you could get a card that says you weren't or something to try to get out of that. But this was one early solution, which I don't know in the long run would it end up mattering when Germany decides and the Vichy government decides that we're rounding up people based on other factors. But soon it becomes, I think that's the message of the film. It's almost like irrelevant. Like you really get the understanding of how baseless and insane it is that you're rounding up somebody based on their ethnicity.
Well, yeah, and that opening scene is incredible because it's really, we don't get that idea again until really the end of the film. There's very little violence. I do consider that opening examination scene to be violent, the way he's going about it, and then she's evaluated to be Jewish. She goes out and meets her husband who just went through the same evaluation, and then the next scene, the husband is selling a painting to Mr. Klein. And so that inhumanity that we see in that opening scene is something that he's benefiting off.
Yeah, but there's another interesting thing. So that man comes into play again at the end of the movie. Mr. Klein, as they're being all carted away on a train, that man shows up behind him.
Yes.
And again, what does it all mean is a question, you know?
Yeah, when you brought up the question of identity and what does it mean to be Jewish, and there's a whole thing here about what is your identity? Is your identity your name? Is it your address? Is it your grandparents' birth certificate? Because it comes down to that there may be some Jews in his ancestry, and so he has to continually prove that he is who he says he is, and not the Jewish Robert Klein. And because of the way the bureaucracy of fascism works, he can't really distinguish the two of them. The way the records are kept and things like that is that and the other guy, the Klein too, or the doppelganger, whatever you want to call him, we sort of gather is sort of intentionally framing him. That's sort of the one idea that is clear about what might be going on is that the other guy is hiding behind this Mr. Klein.
Well, he's a saboteur. That's one of the theories that then maybe gets disproven when Mr. Robert Klein thinks that he's seen a dead body that is Mr. Klein, and then finds out that Mr. Klein is still alive.
Yes.
But then it's almost like, but then it's like Eyes Wide Shut, where he goes and he's going to confront them, but then somebody stops him, and it's like a dream where he can't wake up and he can't get to achieve the goal.
I have that in my notes, Eyes Wide Shut. Absolutely. It's a very similar kind of film in terms of pursuing this mystery. And in doing so, he becomes kind of morally blind a little bit. He sort of stops thinking about what's going on with other people. He's in denial about how bad it is. And he has this illusion that he is immune somehow, that his position as a wealthy Frenchman, and his father says at one point, we've been French and Catholic since Louis XIV. Even though there may be some Jews in the Dutch.
Because then the first like, well, you're not talking about the Swiss or whatever those people were that, suddenly that makes you think like you kind of thought you'd abandoned something that you didn't have to think about your heritage. And that's what, again, it shows you like when we talk about the final stages of fascism, the insane lengths that the Nazis went to track down people that may have been 7 stages away from their Jewish ancestry.
And it made me think, okay, how quickly, and it's different now with electronic information storage and all that stuff, but if I was asked to prove who I was, I've got a driver's license, I've got a passport, but, mostly I'm depending on the records that are kept in some big database somewhere to prove who I am. But we do see, we see identity theft. We see people being arrested mistakenly, mistaken identity, these sorts of things. And so it really got me thinking about what would I do if I was trapped in this bureaucracy that didn't believe who I said I was, and how frightening that can be to sort of lose your identity, lose a sense of agency, and what does identity become under this system? Is identity just your ethnicity? Is it the gold star? Is it is it the name and address on your newspaper? Is that enough to identify who you are? And so I think he starts to really question himself. And I feel like at the end of the film, he has less identity than he did at the beginning.
At the beginning of the movie, he had he was this art dealer. Now, mind you, he was a very kind of nefarious art dealer, but that was like his profession. And he has this girlfriend. He may have a side piece. He may have all these things going on. He's a handsome guy. He can exist in the fascism that's taking place in the occupation because he's the right kind of person.
And he's an opportunist.
Yes. And so suddenly to be labeled a Jew, essentially, which is what this is, that is a crime in itself in this movie. And he never really shows fear in the film, but that's what fears him, is that he's going to be labeled as Jew, which he doesn't seem to harbor any personal hatred of Jewish people, but he's just happy it's not him. until it is.
Exactly. And he just wants to prove he's not Jewish. And if they want to take away the Jews, he's fine with that. They're a transaction for him. And he, in that opening scene where he's buying the painting, he shows no empathy. The guy is like, I'm forced to sell, but you're not forced to buy. And so I'm in a bad position. But he takes that idea of that opportunity and he's taking it everywhere he can find it. But he doesn't show empathy. And then at the end, when he's carted away, we have the voiceover of that scene played again over the very last shot of him offering no sympathy or empathy to this guy who's trying to escape.
Yeah, who ends up being behind him, by the way.
Who ends up being behind him, exactly. And so he's been put in the same bucket as this guy he was taking advantage of. And now I guess he's taking advantage of.
Well, he is, because think about this. And I don't really know what his relationship is. His lawyer or something.
It's his lawyer.
It's his lawyer. Well, his lawyer does to him what he did to the guy at the beginning, where he has to sell any of his possessions, but he's going to have to take a cut. He's not going to get what is. And
this happens also in Mephisto, we talked about, where there's an opportunity to leave. And here he gets money. He has a new passport. He has a train ticket. He's safely leaving France. And on the train gets another clue.
Yeah, and so instead he has to go back and solve the mystery.
He has to go back and solve the mystery. He can't, because at this point, I think he wants the mystery, but also he really wants to prove that he is who he says he is, and he wants other people to believe him, and nobody does. And I think if he finds this guy, he can prove, look, this is the guy. It's not me. I'm not your Mr. Klein. But he's unable to do that.
In the documentary part that I call it, I don't think I was as aware of it the first time I watched it, because you're trying, you're watching this movie, you're trying to absorb the story. But throughout this film, you get these shots.
Interludes.
These interludes that don't seem to have a direct bearing on what we've been watching. And one of them is, it's weird. It's like a bunch of people setting up these letters in a stands. And I think it happens early enough in the movie that the first time around, I had maybe forgotten that scene by the time we got to the end. And then there's another scene, which it almost looks like it's in some kind of Brazil, and I mean Brazil, the Terry Gilliam film, some kind of weird office thing where people are stamping things, going through files. It's very bureaucratic.
Yes.
And what it is everybody is preparing for this version of the final solution, where they're going to be rounding up all of the Jews.
They're preparing for the Veldiv roundup.
Yeah. And you don't realize that. So throughout, Losey is reminding us of what's about to happen and how close it is in the proximity of what's going on in the story. And I don't know, the phrase came to my mind that what I was seeing was kind of the bureaucracy of death.
That's exactly what it is. It's the machinery of murder. It's how these things, and he's caught. Brazil is actually a good example because it's about somebody being caught in bureaucracy, and that's what's going on here.
And then so again, this movie is kind of Kafka-esque because it asks these questions about, a man being accused and he can't prove himself. There's supposedly a doppelganger out there. You can't see it. But then, and I know we mentioned this when we reviewed it and discussed it on our other show a few years ago. In the surrealness of this movie, he tracks down that this other Mr. Klein is supposed to be at a train station at a certain point.
Yes.
And when he gets there, there's someone saying, Mr. Klein, looking for him. And they basically pick him up as if he is this Mr. Klein.
Yeah.
And he is ushered away in chauffeured car out into this estate.
Yes, that's the eyes wide shut part.
And this is another, it's so he's in this weird bourgeois, they're having this bizarre sort of dinner party and everybody is so disaffected and they hardly move. And he seems to be the only one moving in the scene.
Yeah.
And they don't seem to be alarmed or that this person who they clearly should know is not the same Mr. Klein. And there is supposedly the other Mr. Klein's lover, Jean Moreau, is there. And there's this amazing one-shot scene with the two of them But what you see is this mirror behind them.
Yes.
And what Losey does with the mirror is a few things. He uses it so that we get another angle of their conversation without having to switch and make edits. But also you're getting this, constantly you're aware, and I think it's the first time you're really aware, there's a lot of mirrors in this film.
A lot of mirrors.
This double of Mr. Klein. And it adds to this mystery of like, is this a man who's deeply hidden his Jewish heritage because of the fear, and he is kind of fooled himself into a different existence, and then he is discovered somehow, and now he's trying to still prove that he's this other person? Because at some point he gets a second identity, and that's not Mr. Klein. And again, so it's just a very complex movie, but I think the movie is a flat-out masterpiece.
I agree. And just to go back quickly to the sort of the police interludes that we were talking about and sort of the machinery of death and murder there, is that there is this, not just those, but we also see it on the streets. Sort of if he's out on the streets, we get different impressions of how the occupation is sort of building over the course of the film. Like he goes into a coffee shop early on, and as he leaves, there's a "No Jews" sign on the coffee shop door. And attention is not drawn to it. It's part of the background. And it's sort of like he's living in this incredibly oppressive world, but doesn't really notice it until it affects him.
He's also, there's a scene, and I don't think I remembered it very well the first time around, but I certainly did this time. And that is this cabaret.
The dinner theater scene. Where he's with, I mean, I don't know whether it's his fiance or what. No, it's just his girlfriend. He describes her as a friend.
But it's Juliette Berthaud, and she was a very famous actress. She did a lot of stuff in the French New Wave with Jean-Luc Godard, and she's in this movie that, like, very few people have seen, but I love it. It's called Out One. But
yes,
she's also in that same filmmaker's very famous Celine and Julie Go Boating.
Yes.
And she's the love interest. And they're watching this they're watching this theatrical performance that has one of these like awful, grotesque Jewish caricatures in it.
Yeah, with like a fake nose and fake mustache, like a horrible caricature.
It's interesting is the backdrop sets have a poster, a fake poster of this very offensive film, and that's the Jus Suisse.
Yes.
I don't think I had seen that film when I first saw Mr. Klein, and may not have picked it up, but watching it this time, it jumped right out at me.
It jumps right out. Well, and everyone's sort of laughing along with this anti-Semitic caricature, and
except for Juliette Berthaud.
Except for her. She's the one who seems, well, and, Klein also is not really a laughter kind of character, but clearly the crowd is enjoying this. Nobody sees any problem with this.
Well, he has a chuckle, though.
He does have a chuckle, yeah. But it really shows sort of how accepting of this the French were, and that it was really not just totally imposed by the Nazis. And so it, like late in the film, towards the end, when he's finally picked up and put on the bus to be taken to the velodrome or whatever it is, when he's on the bus with all these other characters who are also being carted off, there's scenes of the bus driving through the streets, and all the Parisians are just sort of going about their day, shopping, eating in cafes, and really not noticing that there's buses of people being taken to concentration camps just a few feet away from them. And he sees this going on. He sees that nobody is coming to aid them or anything. And there's this great moment where he writes a little note in his notebook, and he crumples it up, and he tosses it out the window to this guy who's standing on the street. And we assume, we don't see what the note is, but we assume.
I know, doesn't that drive you crazy?
Yes.
Like, I'm like, it got me both times. I was like,
yes.
Wait, what's the note say?
But the reason we don't find out what the note says is because the guy on the street doesn't pick it up. So even this with somebody, it's his last ditch attempt at help. He throws the note, and the Parisians won't even pick up the help me note. And then, of course, the final thing is he shows up and his lawyer is there and it's like, we got the documents. We cleared you. You're all set. And he's like, no, I got to find the other Klein. And
he just I don't even think he says, he just disappears in. He says, I'll be back. And
then he just disappears in. And minutes later, he is on a train on his way to Germany or Poland or somewhere that has a concentration camp.
It's really a must-see, I think, for everybody. It's such a great film. Of course, we've given everything away if you were looking for a mystery, but it's a fantastic movie.
Well, just so you know, the Klein mystery is never solved. So,
well, there you go. Now you've just you've answered that, whether it doesn't get solved. Yeah. But and it really is like, I mean, I was able to, knowing what happens basically in the film, rewatching it, you're looking for clues, and you realize how well constructed the movie is. It's not like, oh, well, if you just paid attention to this one scene, it would have cracked it. I think that it's, still ambiguous.
A lot of the information is contradictory. People lie, like the concierge lady at the other Klein's apartment building. She lies consistently because she's in love with the other Mr. Klein. There's several sort of interrogation scenes that escalate, ultimately with them taking everything out of his apartment. They take everything from him. They take all his art. They take his money. They take his papers and his passport, and really leave him with nothing. But these interrogation scenes are interesting because at one point, one of the detectives says, do you think I do this for fun? It's the law.
And that, I think, is a great example of people will hide behind the law. Well, it's the law, so I have to abide it. And I don't know if I mentioned it was on my last episode, but that is a phrase that I've heard my governor in Vermont use once when the government asked for SNAP data, which is the food program for people.
Right.
But basically so that they can go through that information and decide who might be an immigrant so they can persecute it.
Right.
And the attorney general in our state said, I'm going to join a lawsuit with other states that have said no. Before she could do that, the governor said, well, that's the law. Here you go.
Yep. That's the law. Nothing I can do. As though there's a relationship between law and morality. And also, like you were talking about, those the bureaucratic interludes, is what we see is very little violence, right? It's not violent coercion that's causing people to comply or cooperate or collaborate even. It's administrative power. It's about classifying people. It's about putting people in and defining people, putting them in categories. So it's not direct street violence. It's systems of information and knowledge that are the oppressive thing. And that, I think, is an indictment of France as a country that this film is making a little bit, is, hey, we didn't deal with, this is what was going on, and we just all went about drinking coffee while it happened. And that in and of itself is cooperation and collaboration.
If you participate in any form, you are, in a sense, guilty. And I mean, that's what, Again, we don't know how this will all shake up at the end. So far, I think there's some blood on people's hands. And end of the day, as they say in that cliche, everybody who voted for this, they might say, well, I didn't know this or that. But the fact is, the information was out there. That really is an excuse at this point because a lot's happened since 2015 and you should know. And so, yeah, anything that's really terrible that's happening now, there is blood on your hands. If you make that vote, you voted, and you can't take that back. So it's easy to say, well, this isn't good, but it can't be all that bad. And that's why I think we took this journey in the movies, because the movies, even though they're films, the history that it talks about and the things that we say, and we have enough time in like 80 years or whatever to look back at what was going on in the country back then. You can't escape where you see these eerie similarities.
The scene when he's put on the bus at the end, he has a conversation with a woman on the bus.
And she's really scared.
She's really scared. She says, do you think they're taking us to Germany? I don't know. I've heard this. And then she says, well, they can't be doing that because the French police would never do that. And she can't wrap her head around this unthinkable idea that the French police, who are there to protect the citizens, are actually turning on them. And that's a little bit of that. She's not burying her head in the sand. It's that the truth is too unbelievable for her to accept. And so, yeah, she's scared. She knows what's going on, but she still is saying, wait, the French police, no, this can't be right.
Because being French should mean something.
Exactly. It should mean something. And these people are French since Louis XIV. So I think that kind of denial of the reality is very hard. And, he's doing the same thing. He's denying the reality the whole time. And so I think it is possible to live in this type of environment and just think, well, it won't happen to me for whatever reason, or I can escape, or just ways to sort of look at it that make it seem not quite as bad because you almost can't deal with the depths of how terrible it is.
A really good double feature with this movie would be Terry Gilliam's Brazil. There's a lot in common with the two films because of the mistaken identity and Tuttle Buttle versus, and Klein and
yeah, it's a very similar kind of thing about sort of bureaucracy run amok, and it's a question of what the bureaucracy is in service of. And in this case, it's in service of in Klein, it's in service of genocide.
Yeah, and again, in this country, the idea to get rid of bureaucracy and layers of government that might have been supplying good things around the world and services, whether it be arts and medicine, all this, closing all that down and then channeling that money instead to fund the bureaucracy of this immigration movement.
Yes.
It's quite a striking thing, we'll call it.
To bring that back to the film is that what's going on with that is defining identity. Are you an American? Are you an immigrant? Are you on a green card? What category do you fit into in our spreadsheet? And then what are we going to do with those categories? But it is the action of identity. They are identifying people, labeling them, and putting them in buckets.
Yeah, because there's only certain buckets they want to get rid of.
And that's what is going on in Klein, is and they can't decide which bucket to put him in because they can't define him yet. And so that's sort of the bureaucratic machinery of the whole thing, is to create identity for people and then punish people with certain identities.
Back then, there were no computers, right?
No.
This was a huge bureaucratic effort, signing up people. It's almost like offering them sign-on bonuses to help with the immigration effort or something.
Here, the French police just went right along with it. The French government went way beyond what the occupiers demanded in terms of persecuting Jews.
So the Italians took a little bit longer, but they still got there.
Yeah, they were just a little less efficient, I think.
This is a big recommendation, I think, for people out there. You haven't seen it, you really should check it out.
Not just as a film about fascism, but it's a great film in its own right.
Oh, yeah. It works on many levels. It's top-notch filmmaking. It's a really great introduction to, and this is where we first talked about this film. We did a whole episode on Joseph Losey, and this is a director that at first you're like, who is this guy? And he made some very interesting movies. He made some turkeys too, but he has a very interesting body of work that I definitely think people should check out. This, I think, is his piece de resistance. I think it's a masterful.
I don't know.
Film.
The Servant's pretty good.
The Servant's great too. Alain Delon, there was some knocks on his performance. Vincent Canby originally didn't like his performance, but see, I think it's brilliant. He's channeling his Le Samurai kind of steely persona.
Yeah.
But he's a guy, he has to act with his eyes and he has to be emotionless. And it's more interesting to me that he's not suddenly getting all afraid or...
Exactly. Well, the last shot or the second to last shot of the film is him looking out through the bars of a train car. And it's just a shot of his face, and he plays it almost without expression in a way that could be fear, resignation, confusion. It could be.
I think he's just lost.
And he's lost. Yeah.
I think he lost his identity. That's what this movie is like, it's like he's been stripped by his identity and then he doesn't even know who he is at the end of the movie.
Yeah. And so he just has this blank look on his face. And so, I think it's a fantastic performance. And, I understand that criticism, but he also produced the film. initially, this film was going to be directed by Casagavras, who he came up with the idea for the film, and he was originally supposed to direct it. I think Losey is a much better filmmaker, and just on a craft level, I think he's a much better filmmaker, and ended up making a probably more subtle film than Gavras would have made, because his films tend to be a little bit more propagandistic in their politics.
So coming up on our next episode, we're staying in France, and I'm excited. Teal, you picked kind of the order of these, and I actually think this is a great film. And what's great is that in the next 2 weeks, I'll be rewatching it, and you're going to be seeing it for the first time. And this movie really blew me away. It took me decades to watch it. That's Francois Truffaut's The Last Metro. This film also, it takes place in sort of the later part of the occupation, and it really deals with a lot of facets. Again, we're getting into a little of the Mephisto category, where the show must go on kind of thing, where we are dealing with a French theater troupe. It's about how characters are trying to survive the war. They're trying to make it out alive on the other side, but staying true to who they are, keeping secrets, trying to thwart the Germans. And one of those films where your stomach's going to be tied in knots because it's very intense.
So buckle up, people.
Buckle up. And it features like an absolutely like flat out, a masterful performance by Catherine Deneuve.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully our listeners will join us again next week.
Yes. Fascism on Film, fascismonfilm.com, and Apple Podcasts and all the others. This is James Kent, and with me, as always,
Teal Minton.